Hi, it's Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 Thought for the Day. Today is the observance of Memorial Day. This is to remind us of those who not only served but paid the ultimate price. It's very difficult to do justice for the sacrifice that is made for all of us. We are not at war anywhere. I am thankful to God for that. But those who serve confront many difficult situations in a very dangerous world. There may not be any declared war, but there are still many out there who have chosen to make Americans, and even more so, American military, a target for their causes and agendas. High on the list are those who are trying to win some salvation of their Muslim God, killing non Muslims, primarily Americans, and especially American military. And this is happening as we speak. We at Christ Lutheran Church keep a list of those we know who are actively serving in the military. If you would like to send us if you would like to send us a list of someone you know who is serving, please submit their name, branch of the military, rank through our website. Memorial Day is for those who paid the ultimate price, made the ultimate sacrifice, and we should always remember them. One person I try to remember especially every Memorial Day is Coast Guard Petty Officer Nathan Bruckenthal. The following is from Wikipedia. Nathan Bruckenthal, July 17th, 1979 to April 24th, 2004, was a United States Coast Guardsman who was killed in the Iraq War, becoming the first Coast Guardsman to die in wartime action since the Vietnam War. Bruckenthal and two U.S. Navy sailors were killed while intercepting a waterborne suicide attack on an offshore oil terminal off the coast of Iraq in the northern Persian Gulf in 2004. Bruckenthal was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device and Purple Heart for his actions. People are usually, end quote, people are usually surprised to hear about the Coast Guard serving in foreign wars. The Coast Guard has served in every major military action since 1790 against the Barbary pirates. Petty Officer Bruckenthal lived up to that finest tradition. Having served in the Coast Guard myself and being deployed for military operations to Puerto Rico twice and to Spain, I certainly have to take time to remember Nathan and remember him as a brother Coast Guardsman. Let's take some time today to pray and remember those who died in the service of their country and to ask God to protect those who are currently serving. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to revjamesdriscollmdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30. All are welcome. With the NCTV 45 thought for the day, God bless your day. Hi, it's Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. I started to talk last week about the fact that while the secular humanist governments that we have had in our Western culture have usually not tried very hard when it came to providing what we consider basic services today, and that is mostly in terms of healthcare, protection, education, and social services. There was very little, if any, in terms of public safety for most of the history of Western cultures. The church stepped in about the 4th century in the form of a monastic society that came to be called the Knights Templar. They weren't exactly the cop on the beat, but they did provide actual protection in their 300-year history. The Knights Templar were a group of monks who were the elite soldiers of their time and weren't on the public payroll. I started to describe the efforts of then Bishop Basil to provide shelter for the poor, which included food and to also include health care. Tom Holland, in his book Dominion, describes how Basel built basically public housing and also used for healthcare. Holland writes, incorporated as well as shelter for the poor, what was in effect the first hospital. Basil, who had studied medicine while in Athens, did not himself scorn to tend the sick, even lepers, whose deformities and suppurations rendered them objects of particular revulsion, might be welcomed by the bishop with a kiss and given both refuge and care. The more broken men and women were, the readier was Basil to glimpse Christ in them, unquote. I've seen courage in many different forms, but here's someone who was not only trying to minister to heal the body, but also the mind and spirit. What a man St. Basil must have been. And to the Knights Templar who placed themselves in danger protecting the people in their communities. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to Rev. James Driscoll, mdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day. Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. Another issue people have tried to tie the church to is that the church supported slavery. From the very beginning of the church and the Roman culture, where slaves outnumbered free citizens, to when slavery still existed in the southern United States in the 19th century, they seem not to grasp that the abolitionist movement of that century consisted of mostly Christians. Prominent among them were Frederick Douglass, President John Adams, Harriet Tubman, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Sojourner Truth. My home state of Massachusetts was a hotbed of anti-slavery activity. The famous Black Battalion, 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. The vast majority of American citizens were happily complacent that slavery was just a part of the culture. The Christians actively worked to end slavery. So did the church from the 3rd century. Needless to say, there were many Roman slaves who were Christians. Among the average secular humanists was just fine with slavery. Christians of that period worked to at least help slaves. Tom Holland, in his book Dominion, writes, the spectacle in a slave market of a boy sold by his starving parents, the one child sacrificed that his siblings might have some few scraps of food, provoked the Bishop Basil to a particularly scorching excoriation of the rich. Quote, the bread in your board belongs to the hungry, the cloak in your wardrobe to the naked, the shoes you let rot to the barefoot, the money in your vaults to the destitute, unquote. The church did not countenance slavery to enrich the average secular humanist who was about lining his pocket, usually at the expense of someone who was poor and suffering. The culture had no interest in stepping up to protect the poor slaves, but the church did what it could to turn the world against slavery. The world didn't care so long as it didn't cost them anything. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to Rev. James Driscoll, mdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day. I'm recording. I'm recording. Just give me 5 more minutes, okay? Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. Despite what some silly little folk think who really are just haters, can't tolerate the Christian church because the church will just not roll over to the greed and lust of the current culture. Sorry, the church will tell you sex outside of marriage is a sin. Heterosexual, homosexual, whatever other you want to include. You can hate on the church because it's being judgmental. That's the sin today. A word the haters love to throw around and don't understand while they're being hateful and judgmental to the church. Go figure. Paul Washer has a great quote. People tell me, judge not lest ye be judged. I tell them, twist not scripture lest you be like Satan. That's what you're doing. Unquote. Christian church has always taught that man is valuable beyond anything we can imagine. All people are made in the imago Dei, the image of God. By virtue of that, there is a value to a human being beyond anything any human being could calculate, which doesn't keep the average secular humanist from trying. We were talking about how the church has stood against slavery from its very beginning until the time that Christian abolitionists led the country to abolish slavery after the American Civil War. Bishop Gregory, Bishop Basil's brother, wrote the following about Roman slavery. Human nature, so Bishop Gregory preached, had been constituted by its creator as something free. As such, it was literally priceless. Not all the universe would constitute an adequate payment for the soul of a mortal. Gregory's impassioned insistence that to own slaves was to set one's power above God's and to trample on the dignity that was properly the right of every man and woman seems pretty pro-human anti-slavery to me, but to the secular humanists, just nuisance. They were fine that their fellow humans were subjected to other humans. Christians have always been at the front of social causes. The secular humanists liked waiting in the shadows to see how things played out and then try to take credit. Christians stood up for what is good and right. I'm Jim Driscoll, the pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us on the web, christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to revjamesdriscollmdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day. Hi, this is Pastor Jim Driscoll of Christ Lutheran Church with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. Yes, those noble Romans that the secular humanists love to extol were really cruel, rather inhuman monsters. Yes, abortion is a hot topic of today, and secular humanists are all about killing defenseless babies. Many would promote killing even after being born. Yes, really. Well, abortion in the age of Rome was not a safe alternative. It's not today either, actually. The Romans also wanted to decide which baby they wanted to keep and which they would dispose of. Holland writes, across the Roman world, wailing at the sides of the roads or on rubbish tips, babies abandoned by their parents were a common sight. What kind of sadistic monster would do that? My stomach gets twisted at the thought that my dog Uriah might get lost and suffer. But a human baby? The majority of people, secular humanists, weren't really concerned. They just the way it is. Some things will never change, to quote Bruce Hornsby. If the baby was deformed, it was almost a given that the parents wouldn't try to raise the child. And you rabid feminists who are so callous, the baby was a girl, pretty good chance, quoting Holland, girls in particular were liable to be winnowed ruthlessly, or they would be taken and raised as slaves or prostitutes, unquote. Yeah, nice people, those secular humanists. Nice, you feminists said, caring parents, huh? Basil and Gregory's sister Macrina took on the cause of rescuing babies. Macrina helped to rescue babies, placed them with loving Christian parents, and even took some children to raise herself. So yes, saving babies has been done by Christians for essentially the entire time of the church. We aren't trying to embarrass or abuse anyone about abortion, but Christians have always been about saving lives and bringing people to know Jesus, saving spiritual, physical, and eternal lives also. I'm Jim Driscoll, a pastor of Christ Lutheran Church, 1302 East Washington Street, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Check us out on the web. It's christlutheran-newcastle.org. Questions, comments, contact me on the website. For a transcript of today's thought, go to revjamesdriscollmdiv.com. Sunday worship is at 10:30 a.m. All are welcome with the NCTV 45 thought for the day. God bless your day.